All right, let's talk about one of the most complicated figures to ever sit in the Oval Office, Lyndon Baines Johnson, or LBJ. His presidency, wow, it was a period of absolutely massive change, led by a man who was, to put it mildly, a true force of nature. When you look at LBJ's presidency, it's really a story of two extremes. We're talking about soaring triumphs and just crushing tragedies. Think about it. He takes over a country that's just been traumatized and then goes on to pass these landmark, world-changing laws. But at the very same time, he gets swallowed up by one of the most painful, divisive wars in American history. So, picture this. November 22nd, 1963. The nation is in shock. And there, aboard Air Force One, just hours after JFK's assassination, Lyndon Johnson takes the oath of office. Now, this guy was no rookie. He was a Washington insider through and through, a real political giant. People talked about his personality. It was huge, and he was famous, or maybe infamous, for his Johnson treatment. He'd literally use his height, get right in your face, and just persuade you with sheer force. It was a skill he was about to use like never before. Okay, so what was Johnson's big vision? At the absolute core of his presidency was this wildly ambitious plan he called the Great Society. And when I say ambitious, I mean it. His goal? Oh, just to end poverty and wipe out racial injustice. No big deal, right? He wanted to build a nation where life wasn't just about survival, but about quality for every single person. And here's the crazy part. Look at these programs. Medicare, Medicaid, Head Start. These are names you still hear all the time. They're a huge part of American life today. Medicare and Medicaid, they completely transformed healthcare. Head Start, it gave millions of kids a chance to succeed before they even started kindergarten. This wasn't just a list of new laws. These were gigantic, foundational changes to what the government did for its people. Now, as if that wasn't enough, he took that same energy and aimed it at what would become his other massive legacy, civil rights. He saw the power of the civil rights movement, and he put all of his political weight, that famous Johnson treatment, behind it. He was going to ram through laws that had been stuck for decades. His mission was clear: tear down the legal walls of segregation, piece by piece. Just look at how fast this happened. It was like dominoes falling. Boom, 1964, the Civil Rights Act. This was huge. It made segregation illegal in public places. Boom, 1965, the Voting Rights Act. This one attacked the unfair rules that had stopped Black Americans from voting for generations. And then, boom, 1968, the Fair Housing Act, going after discrimination in housing. You put these three together, it was nothing short of a revolution. And believe it or not, he wasn't done. He just kept going. The environments, he signs the Clean Air Act and the Water Quality Act. What's in your food? He pushes for honest labeling. And our schools? He funneled a ton of federal money into them, especially for kids who needed it most. I mean, when you step back and look at it all, the sheer amount of stuff he got done on the home front is just staggering. But, and this is a massive but, while all this incredible progress was happening at home, this dark cloud was forming on the other side of the world. And this slide really says it all. On one side, you have this amazing dream, the Great Society. But on the other, you have the brutal reality that would overshadow everything, the Vietnam War. So let's be clear about something. Vietnam wasn't LBJ's war, not at the start anyway. He inherited it from Kennedy and Eisenhower before him. It was all tangled up in the Cold War, this big fear of communism spreading. The U.S. was already there, helping South Vietnam. And Johnson, like many leaders at the time, was terrified of the domino theory, the idea that if Vietnam fell to communism, the rest of Southeast Asia would be next. And you can see on this timeline just how things spiraled out of control. It started with just a few thousand advisors on the ground. But under Johnson, that number just exploded. It became a massive, full-scale war. By the end of the 60s, we're talking more than 500,000 American soldiers in Vietnam. And the horrible part was, the war just kept going, casualties kept mounting, and there was no end in sight. And that conflict wasn't just happening over there. It came home, and it ripped America right down the middle. A huge anti-war movement just exploded. You had protests on college campuses, marches in the streets. The country was completely split. It was like two Americas, one that supported the war and another that believed it was a catastrophic mistake. And this is where something called the credibility gap really took hold. Basically, the government kept saying, we're winning, things are going great, but then people would turn on the TV news at night and see something completely different. They saw the chaos, the casualties, the grim reality, and they started to think, wait a second, who's telling the truth here? that trust in the government and in LBJ himself just started to crumble. This table really lays it all out, how Vietnam became this poison that infected everything else. It's the ultimate tragedy of his presidency. All that money, all that focus, it was being poured into the war instead of the Great Society programs at home. The country was too busy fighting with itself to move forward. The war was like a giant anchor, and it was pulling his entire presidency and all his dreams for America straight to the bottom. So, where does that leave us? How do we even begin to unpack a legacy this messy? Well, by 1968, things were at a breaking point. The country was a mess, protests were everywhere, and Johnson's approval ratings were in the basement. The pressure on him was just immense. And then he did something nobody saw coming. He gets on national television and drops a bombshell. He announced that he would not run for re-election. Can you imagine the shock? It was basically him admitting that the war had broken him. He was trapped in a conflict he didn't know how to win, but also felt he couldn't just walk away from. But here's the thing. Even with that giant shadow of Vietnam hanging over everything, you just can't ignore what he did at home. His achievements were, and still are, absolutely massive. He pushed through more powerful civil rights laws than any president, period. And all those Great Society programs, they are still a bedrock of the American social safety net. They help millions of people every single day. And that brings us right back to the central puzzle of LBJ. So how do we remember him? Is he the brilliant leader who built the Great Society and fought for civil rights? Or is he the president who got America stuck in the mud of Vietnam? The toughest part is realizing the answer is yes. He was both. He was a giant of a man who achieved incredible things, and he was also the man at the center of a national tragedy. And that incredible contradiction is what makes his story so powerful and so important to understand.